Welcome to The Favorites, the podcast presented by Bet365. We are part of the Action Network. I am Chad Millman, Chief Content Officer of the Action Network. Joining me to do this fantastic show is my co-host, my companion, my compadre, my BFF professional better, Simon Hunter. Hello, Simon.
Hello, Chad. How we doing?
Brother, you know those shows where I know it's going to be great because I know exactly how you're going to respond to what one guest says, how that guest is going to respond to what the other guest says, because I don't think I've heard three other people talk more than you and our two guests today when it comes to the 7 years that I've been with Action Network. We are doing our annual fantasy football update episode with two Action Network and Fantasy Labs superstars. As we did last year, we'll discuss their top 5 most intriguing offseason moves from a NFL fantasy perspective. And by the way, 5, I put it in quotes, that's a loose 5 because I'm sure we'll go off the rails a little bit. Our first guest is Chris Raybon, co-host of the Action Network podcast and the Fantasy Flex, one of the very best player positional rankers in the world. We could say best, if not for the odds maker, Sean Kerner, our director of predictive analytics, one of the originators of the luck rankings, one of our favorite stats that we talk about all the time on the podcast. Sean has been a Fantasy Pros #1 ranked NFL expert 3 times, awarded most accurate NFL player projections 4 times. I believe last year when they did the write-up about his rankings, they basically called him the GOAT. Raybon, though, he's classy. He doesn't get jealous about that. Welcome to the show, fellas.
Thanks for having me. And congrats again, Sean. Can't get jealous. It's all about that synergy, baby.
Absolutely.
There's nobody who's more supportive of Sean Kerner than Chris Raybon.
Well, it goes both ways, ideally,
Yeah.
hopefully.
It's almost like you guys aren't even members of the media because you are so supportive of each other. It's almost
shots.
It's just
shots
lovely.
At the rest of the media. Damn, Chad. Tell them how you really feel.
It's just lovely to see. Lovely. As a reminder, the Favorites podcast is presented by Bet365. Bet365 doesn't do ordinary. That's why you get more boosts with them than with anyone else. Every day, they power up the odds on hundreds of bets to give you a chance to win more. Bet365 boosts specific markets, your winnings, and even parlays, and they don't stop there. Keep an eye out for their biggest and best odds with the incredible Super Boost. Check out the boost and see why it's never ordinary at Bet365. Must be 21 or older and present in Arizona, Colorado, Indiana, Iowa, Louisiana, North Carolina, New Jersey, Ohio, Virginia, or 18 and older in Kentucky. Gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER or 1-800-BETS-OFF in 1-800-BETS-OFF in Iowa. Terms, conditions, restrictions apply. Catch every episode of The Favorites live on YouTube. For those enjoying on YouTube, don't forget to give us a like and subscribe to the Action Network YouTube page. Simon, I always forget that, like, you are a closet fantasy freak. So I know before we even get to Raybon and Kerner's top 5 most intriguing moves, you've got some very serious questions about a name that's not on the list.
Yeah, I'm a best ball guy though, Chad. I do season-long stuff. Like I'm in a couple of dynasty leagues, but as these guys know, when you're doing sports betting, it is so hard to do both because you have to be on top of the waiver wire while trying to get your bets in. It's too much. So for me, best ball, you just set and forget your lineups. It's my favorite thing to do. So off the top, I have a couple of best ball questions I think our fans might benefit from. Where last year, I like finding bad teams that people don't like in the regular season, and I load up on them for fantasy. And last year, that team for me was the Rams. This year, my team, I know it's going to shock people and gross them out. It's the Giants. Like, I love Neighbors. I love Hyatt, the wide receiver. Like, I think their offensive line's improved. And Daniel Jones, with Barkley leaving, I think he might get more rushing touchdowns this season, which is like not being counted into his grade right now, where in best ball, he's going as a 30th quarterback. So I would love to know your guys' view of this, where it's like, I mean, come on, if that's going to be your second or third QB at the end of the draft, why is not everyone just taking Daniel Jones on a flyer? The fact that he could run for 10 rushing touchdowns. Chris, I'll start with you because you are a Giants fan.
Yeah, so I do like that stack. It's not my favorite disgusting stack. I'll talk about that a little later. But I agree with you. We've seen Daniel Jones have passing upside. His rookie year, he had a couple, I think 3 games with 4+ touchdowns, 400+ passing yards. We've seen him with the rushing upside under Dable. And I think you stack him with Neighbors. The hardest part really is being able to draft Neighbors because, he's an early round pick. But you stack him with Neighbors and you stack him with Jalen Hyatt, because even if Jalen Hyatt's just like a situational deep threat number 4 receiver, he's a guy who's going to, like if things go right, he's going to average 20 yards a catch. He's going to put up, a few long touchdowns, and he's going to really kind of help Daniel Jones's passing value. So I do like it. I think the Giants are going to be a pretty shaky team, so they'll probably have to throw more. And like you said, no Barkley. So yeah, I think that's exactly what you want to do in best ball, is find those cheap stacks. That's how you really take advantage of the correlations.
Kerner.
Oh, I like it. Especially for best ball. Daniel Jones does provide those spiked weeks that you certainly need in best ball. I think in terms of stacks, I would also take a flyer maybe on like Theo Johnson at tight end. I mean, it looks like Darren Waller might be announcing his retirement very soon. So I could see Johnson's ADP kind of go up after that becomes official.
That's who you think will be their number 1 tight end?
I think it'll be him and Daniel Bellinger. I think Theo Johnson certainly has more upside. So I'm just saying that both their ADPs will probably go up once Waller makes it official that he's retiring. The one caveat with Daniel Jones is he's actually listed as one of the quarterbacks where you could bet on if he'll actually start week 1. I don't even know if there's a controversy, but he's around like minus 400 over Drew Lock. So, I mean, I guess there's a chance he might not even be the starter. But I'm with you. I think that kind of just is already baked in as ADP. I mean, he's going around QB 30, and I think, you can make a case he should be in the low 20s if he is going to start every game. But I guess that's the one thing is there might be some quarterback controversy with him and Drew Lock.
Well, also, it's not, I think it may be, I mean, obviously, Daniel Jones's job is never going to be secure. He's Daniel Jones, but he's coming off the torn ACL, which he had surgery in late November. So I think there's an outside chance he's not actually ready to go in week 1. So that would be the issue. But so I think that also plays into it.
I should let everybody know we're talking about players and stacks and options and ADP and all that kind of stuff. We are pre-recording this show, so we're getting one out of the way. Some of these things might change between when we are recording and when this show actually airs. I would say 95% of what we're saying will still be accurate, but you never know. Some things change. So just all listeners, be aware, be like Raybon. Just be supportive. Don't be a hater, right?
I was just going to say things are probably not going to change to the point where Matt is just going to cut that whole thing you just said out, Chad. And the listeners will never know the difference.
Yeah, except one thing. Mitchell is the one who just told me to say it.
Oh,
There
wow.
you go.
You got me.
Yeah,
you got
I
me.
got you. Listen,
Damn it, Matt.
You know what, Raybon? Let me host the show. You can go back to being a guest.
Fine, Chad.
All right. But listen, there have been a lot of intriguing moves in the offseason. Kirk Cousins to Atlanta is fascinating. Everything going on with the Chiefs is wild. You guys are both repping, I think, some of the more intriguing moves that you guys are ranking at the top of your top 5. Raybon, I will start with you. Give me your first most intriguing move this offseason.
All right. And I just want to issue a disclaimer. Like Sean and I both didn't take the low-hanging fruit and go with anything the Bears did. So we're just we know the Bears loaded up, but we're going to talk about something that I think is a little more intriguing just because of all the pieces it kind of leaves and shuffles. And that's Stefon Diggs being traded to the Houston Texans. So first of all, Nico Collins, Tank Dell. Yes, that's a little bit of a hit to their value, but CJ Stroud now, he's going as the QB 13 in consensus ADP. There's certain sites, you can still get him outside the top 100. CJ Stroud had one of the best rookie seasons of all time last year. Now he's got 3 all-pro caliber wide receivers, one of the better receiving tight ends in the league in Dalton Schultz. Everyone's going to be open every play, and this guy is one of the most accurate, strongest armed, best anticipators that we've seen in a while. So I just think with all the quarterbacks this year, the quarterback is kind of loaded, assuming guys stay healthy. I mean, you got Anthony Richardson back, Jordan Love broke out, Burrow's coming back. So to get a guy like CJ Stroud, outside the top 6 or 7 rounds, to get him in some cases outside the top 10 or even the top 12 quarterbacks, I just think that's massive, because I mean, he could have he could challenge if Patrick Mahomes' 50 touchdown season. Like, that's how efficient, that's how good CJ Stroud is with Diggs being added to his supporting cast. And Diggs might be the 3rd best wide receiver on the Houston Texans. So I think all 3 of them are worth top 25 picks, especially in best ball, where you don't have to predict, which weeks they'll go off. But I would say, even like, you want to be in best ball, you want to be looking at like the Texans number 4 wide receiver, because like a Noah Brown, just because if any one of those guys get hurt, I mean, we've seen Noah Brown put up like 180 yards a couple of times last year. Like, whoever is not one of those guys is going to be so open every play as well, just because the defense is going to pay them no attention. So I just love everything about this Diggs move to the Texans. And then, for the Bills, they lose not only Diggs, but Gabe Davis. So that makes Keon Coleman, who was drafted by Buffalo early in the draft, at wide receiver. That makes him an interesting kind of dart throw in best ball. You don't, even if he starts a little slow and takes some time, you're fine. And then in redraft, he's one of the few guys that you could get, outside the top 50 wide receivers, that has a legitimate shot to be his team's, number 1 wide receiver. And you're talking about Josh Allen's number 1 wide receiver too. I think they'll throw a little less, like they did over the second half once they switched to Brady. But I just think this Diggs move, it opens up Coleman in Buffalo, and it makes Stroud a really, really strong pick for a late round quarterback.
Kroner, why doesn't anyone feel like there will be the natural regression in a second year for CJ Stroud?
Because he's just good, and he has a good supporting cast. I think another interesting thing from last season is he never had all his receivers healthy at once, which made it even more impressive what he did. So now they just have Diggs there. He can even afford a guy or 2 being hurt. So I think just last year, it was just so impressive what he did as a rookie that it's hard to really bake in too much regression. I think if anything, he's just going to get better.
And he had the number 1 most injured offensive line, which again is something that's not talked about, where it's like, even if they keep the guys healthy, right? We always talk about the injury regression. It's like, that's going to be a boost to them. So me and Chad thought we wanted to fade them after the Diggs move. Both of us were like, I'm not putting money on their under. Like, that's going to be a high-powered team. Even if he does regress a little bit, I do agree. It's like the team has done nothing but support him, right? They went out and got pieces to make the team better, added another running back. So love to start. Sean, we got to hit you with the number 1. What do you got? Something, I'm going to guess it's something to do with your hat.
Yeah, let's discuss, Kirk Cousins going to the Falcons. The Falcons have just been a frustrating team, to say the least, in terms of fantasy the past few seasons, because they have, a few potential studs in Bijan Robinson, Drake London, and Kyle Pitts, but they've all been, held back by poor quarterback play and just a run-heavy scheme to overcome it. Head coach Arthur Smith was part of the problem. So hopefully the new coaching staff under Raheem Morris and offensive coordinator Zach Robinson will help. But, certainly adding Kirk Cousins is going to help unlock the fantasy ceiling of, Drake London and Kyle Pitts, but potentially Bijan Robinson as well. And, it's also led to some other interesting questions, like, how will Justin Jefferson fare without Kirk Cousins? I mean, he's still arguably the best receiver in the game, but, how good can he be with either Sam Darnold or JJ McCarthy under center? And also, the Falcons made that controversial move by drafting Michael Penix. I had basically had him projected to go to the Raiders and play, most of the games there this season. But now he's stuck behind Kirk Cousins. As long as Kirk Cousins is healthy, Penix isn't going to play. So we had one of the better, rookie quarterbacks, stuck behind a veteran this year. So that kind of put the Raiders in a pinch this year where they're going to have to lean on Gardner Minshew and Aiden O'Connell this year. But the Kirk Cousins move to the Falcons, I think will be, very intriguing for fantasy because we've been waiting for a player like Kyle Pitts to break out. I think he could be one of the top tight ends this year. And same thing with Drake London. He was one of my favorite receivers, a couple of years ago. But I think now we're going to finally see his potential unlocked here.
Look, the Falcons are setting us up for perennial disappointment. It's so frustrating to watch that team. We loved them last year. We thought Bijan would. Braybon, I think you had Bijan before the year began to lead the league in rushing.
Yep.
Right? I bet that one. And it all made perfectly good sense. I'll be very curious to see how does Kirk Cousins hold up. The clock is ticking on guys like this. We're going to see it with Aaron Rodgers. We're going to see it with Kirk Cousins. How can people who have been consistently good to great come back at this age from Achilles? Chris, Kansas City Chiefs, so much turmoil this offseason. Receivers getting arrested, trades for receivers, defensive players, high-quality defensive players leaving the team, the Harrison Butker controversies. Your second most intriguing move this offseason is?
Xavier Worthy going in round number 1 to the Kansas City Chiefs, the wide receiver out of Texas. And listen, we don't know if he's going to pan out for sure. There's a reason he wasn't taken in the top 10 or whatever. And some people even thought they may have reached a little. But the thing I like about this move, well, a couple of things. Number one, a 4.21.40, essentially the fastest player ever recorded at the combine. So you're taking outlier speed at receiver and you're combining it with the most outlier of outliers at quarterback. And I mean, if you want to be fair, an outlier at head coach and schemer, play caller, whatever you want to call it as well. So I just like that combination in fantasy. You're looking for upside, best ball, redraft, whatever. You're still looking for upside regardless. Xavier Worthy still a guy that's going, outside of the top 36 receivers in most drafts. So I think the price is right. And then Rashee Rice is just helping his cause because Rashee Rice is almost certainly going to face some type of suspension, barring his legal cases just get held up and the suspension doesn't come till next year. But almost certainly he's going to get a multi-game suspension. Now we're starting to hear whispers that the Chiefs are expecting him to be out for at least half a season. Now remember, Rashee Rice, over the second half of the year, he was playing on 90% of the snaps and he was catching, 5, 6, 7 balls a game. So that's a big loss. It opens up just a lot of potential usage for Worthy, who was the highest wide receiver ever drafted in the Andy Reid era, ever drafted in the Brett Veach era. So that tells you what they think of this guy. And if there's anybody you're going to pair him with, maybe he might not be good on any other team, but Patrick Mahomes, Andy Reid, and some targets up for grabs because, Kadarius Toney, Sky Moore, I think that ship has sailed. So, I mean, and Travis Kelce's 35. Sean is going to talk about Marquise Brown, who's an intriguing addition, but, outside, and that's his first year with the team. There's just a massive opportunity. That's what you're looking for in fantasy, opportunity and some talent, and you got both in spades with Xavier Worthy.
Well, someone that's owned Sky Moore, painful. I mean, oh my God, you just gave me PTSD saying that name. So, this is the hope, right? When you draft guys like this, especially in best ball, it's he could be the Deshaun Jackson type, right? One or two catches a game, and if one of them breaks, especially the new kick return, right? I mean, something I'd love to ask you guys about with fantasy at the end, but that could be a huge deal, right? The new rules changing the kickoff. This could be a huge thing in fantasy football. I mean, we haven't even talked about that, but in the old days, I mean, people that might be too young to remember it. I mean, Chad remembers it. Devin Hester, Bears defense was a game changer in fantasy football. And because of guys like Devin Hester. And this is another guy where you've seen him in practice here, Worthy returning punts. So yeah, Chris is dropping a name here, people that keep on your radar. Like, this is a guy that, you know, I don't want to be bringing up too much. I've been taking him in best ball, but he's a great sneaky pick. A guy get a lot of touches. But Sean, can you top it? Who's your number 2?
Yeah, my number 2's Lad McConkey out of Georgia, being drafted by the Chargers in the 2nd round.
Love him.
And it was almost exactly a year ago today. I was talking about Sam Laporta of the Lions in the 2nd round as one of my favorite landing spots. This gives me similar vibes because I was high on McConkey going into the draft and then just love the landing spot. You know, he gives me Julian Edelman vibes where he can line up in the slot. He can line up outside. He has 4.39 speed, so he could be their top deep threat. But this is a team in the Chargers that just moved on from Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, and even Austin Eckler. So that's just a ton of targets available. And, you know, I think he's going to mainly pick up the Keenan Allen targets, which are extremely valuable because there's a ton of them. But again, he could also be a deep threat. And, you know, he's competing against Josh Palmer, Quentin Johnson, who was a disappointment last year, and DJ Chark. So there's a very good chance he could be Justin Herbert's number 1 target as a rookie. So this was one of my favorite landing spots from this draft.
What's interesting about the Chargers is, you know, whatever we've seen from them offensively the past couple of years, they're just going to be so different. Like, they are not going to throw the ball downfield with abandon the way they have the past few years. I think they will still find ways to play to Herbert's strengths as a quarterback and what he's really good at, but they're also going to be able to put him in a position to succeed much more frequently in high leverage situations. McConkey is a perfect guy who's an example of what they could do in those situations. I like it. I like it a lot. Raybon. No, hold on. I got to set up here.
Okay. You paused, so I was like, all right.
You did pause.
It's drama. It's dramatic pause. The first team that I bet for a futures bet to win the Super Bowl this year, they were, I think, 18-1. Simon and I talked about it in the podcast. Cincinnati Bengals. There is a move that they made that is your 3rd most intriguing move of the offseason.
Yeah. And I like this one because...
And let me just say... No, I'm kidding.
This one is... And it's Zach Moss going from the Colts to the Bengals. And remember, Joe Mixon got traded to Houston. So Mixon is another guy that will be able to benefit from that loaded Houston offense and all the attention being paid to that passing game. But I want to talk about Moss to the Bengals because I think he's a perfect scheme fit to replace Mixon. And he gave us a glimpse of what he would look like as a feature back weeks 2 through 5 last year. If you'll remember, averaged over 24 touches and over 129 scrimmage yards per game over a 4-game stretch with a touchdown per game as well, on an 83% snap rate. So he's been able to, you know, after a rough start to his career in Buffalo, he's been able to kind of right the ship. He passes the eye test, and you know, he's going to kind of slot in that mix and roll. I think Chase Brown will still be there, and he's kind of intriguing as well. Very explosive guy, but Mixon, you know, every year people wanted to write him off in this Bengals offense, and all he does is keep putting up, you know, top 15 fantasy seasons. And I think Moss has very similar upside. I mean, Joe Mixon was, you know, in some scoring systems, he was as high as the RB5 last year, the RB7 in half PPR. So that's the kind of upside Moss has. And, you know, you hit on it, Chad. You know, the Bengals, they get this last place schedule. They get Burrow coming back. You know, they lose one of their receivers in Tyra Boyd. So, you know, maybe the running game becomes even more important. So we know this team is going to move the ball up and down the field. Mixon had 12 touchdowns total last year. I think Moss has an outside shot at leading the league in touchdowns because we know how good this offense is. So I think 12 touchdowns for the Bengals running back, it was actually kind of low. So I really like Moss here going to Cincinnati. I think it'll be about a 75-25 or 70-30 split between him and Brown. You know, Brown is kind of best used as like a change of pace, after Moss kind of, wears down the defense. Brown can break one, but I think Moss will be the closer. Moss will be the goal line back. Moss will be the featured back. So under the radar move of Cincinnati signing Zach Moss.
So I love Cincinnati. I am going to remember that you said I kind of nailed it when we get to convince me, and it's the middle of the season, and you're just coming after me for God knows whatever I say on the show. But I am curious. I'd like Kerner's take on this and Simon's take on this. Shane Steichen is clearly one of the better offensive head coaches and strategists and schemers in the NFL. What he did with that Colts team last year, after Richardson went down, after Gardner Minshew became the quarterback, getting them to be in the position they were, and with a guy like Minshew, how much do we think Zach Moss, in that window that you're talking about, where he did sort of overperform versus his career, benefit from being in that kind of system, and does that translate to the Bengals? Kerner, give me your take.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point. Certainly he benefited from the scheme, but you could just see how well he did compared to Jonathan Taylor, who's still one of the best running backs in the game. And he looked every bit as good as JT. I mean, it was kind of comical how they finally gave JT that big contract, and Zach Moss looked like the best running back in the league once that happened. So I think just comparatively, Zach Moss is keeping up with Jonathan Taylor. So even if he did benefit from the scheme, he is a really good back. I mean, it's crazy because he had a slow start in Buffalo, kind of bouncing around, but he was a highly touted back coming out of college. So I just think last year kind of proved that he does kind of have the talent that could translate in a different scheme.
Yeah, this is where I make my money, Chad. If you don't, again, Sean here, Chris, great fantasy experts. A lot of guys are kind of full of shit in this industry. You can pick at spots with these running backs where it's like Raheem Mostert's a perfect example. The man was in an incredible opportunity last year. You could get him in the 9th round. David Montgomery, an incredible opportunity. You could get him in the 8th and 9th round. Same thing here. This guy could be a bust, dude. This guy could get you 0 points, or he could be a top 5 running back. Like, that's the upside with these kind of guys. So it's a guy, you don't have to draft him in every league. You want to own Moss in a couple of different leagues. I don't think the Colts, I think, just showed his athleticism, how good of a skilled player he is. It's all about opportunity with a lot of these running backs. A lot of these guys are such great athletes. It's just, can they have the opportunity in a good offense with a good offensive line? So Moss could get you 0 points, people, but his upside is really high. So definitely a guy I've been grabbing a lot of leagues.
Simon, before you ask Kerner about his next pick, I just want it noted, Kerner also said I made a really good point. And I would like to say right now, very possible in early February of 2025, the 4 of us are on the show, Convince Me, and we are talking about, is there value on Zach Moss to win Super Bowl MVP when the Bengals are playing the Eagles? Just saying.
I'm still going T. Higgins at 60-1.
There you go.
Could be, by the way. Simon, go ahead.
Yeah. I mean, stay on the running back, Sean. Who you got for us next?
So I'm going with Josh Jacobs going to the Packers. Jacobs is coming off a down year, but he's still in the tail end of his prime at 26, and he's potentially going to be a workhorse back in an offense that should continue to trend up this year. But I think the intriguing part of this move is it essentially gave us 3 teams with the new starting running back, because now that Jacobs is no longer in Vegas, third-year back Zamir White will probably be their workhorse back. And he was very impressive last season when he was asked to step up. After the Packers signed Josh Jacobs, they released Aaron Jones, who then ended up in their NFC North rival, Minnesota Vikings. So he's going to be the Vikings lead back this year, which is going to be interesting for a couple games when they face the Packers. But I love this move because it gave us 3 new starting running backs for teams, and it's always fun to be projecting teams when they have a new starting running back. So this move gave us 3 of them.
I wonder what's going to happen. Like, he is just not the same receiver out of the backfield that they've had in the past. I'm curious about this fit as it impacts the overall season for the Packers. Simon and I have been talking about that one a lot. Raybon, number 4 involves the Washington Commanders.
Yeah, I mean, last year we saw, it wasn't the number one quarterback who did work in fantasy and real life. It was the number two. And this year, that number two pick, Jayden Daniels, I just think he's another guy here who you have to invest in fantasy because of his rushing upside. Now, he could be really bad. He could be Justin Fields 2.0 or something like that and be terrible. But in fantasy, again, especially when you're picking a quarterback outside the top 10, outside the top 12, where you can get Daniels in a bunch of drafts still. When you're picking a guy late like that at quarterback, you're looking for upside. And Jayden Daniels has the upside to put up similar numbers to a guy like Anthony Richardson, who goes as high as the quarterback 6, quarterback 7 in some drafts. Jayden Daniels has the upside to because of his rushing to put up more points than a guy like a Jordan Love, who's more of he runs a little bit, but not, you wouldn't consider him a scrambling quarterback, guys like that. So I think Jayden Daniels going to a place where, like Caleb Williams, there's all the hype because they drafted Rome Odunze, where it's like Jayden Daniels is going to a pretty bad team. So, they should have decent passing volume. The receivers are solid. Terry McLaurin's very good. Dotson still has some upside. But you'll know he'll still be scrambling a ton. So, and this guy, he actually threw the ball. He was a very good passer in school as well. Now, will that translate? That remains to be seen. And he's also got Austin Eckler, a low key, guy who can help him in the receiving game as well. So I just like Jayden Daniels here and the upside that he brings to just another late round quarterback selection. There was a couple years in there where you kind of had to start drafting quarterbacks a little higher, guys like Mahomes and Hurts and Burrow were dominating and Herbert, but now quarterback, it's pretty deep. So I think this year I find myself waiting almost every draft at quarterback because you want to take your shots at those wide receivers and those running backs. And I mean, tight end is a nightmare too. So if you're going to spend a premium pick on one of those positions where you only have to start one per week, then I would rather do it at tight end and wait on a quarterback. And if I'm getting a guy like CJ Stroud or a guy like Jayden Daniels, I'll take that upside every time.
When did you just had some aggressive Justin Fields violence. And for a lot of people, it was down to the wire in the end of the season before the Bears were making a choice of keeping Justin Fields or deciding they were going to go for Caleb Williams. From your metrics, Raybon and Kroner, I'm curious, when did you see sort of the most precipitous decline with Justin Fields? When was it clear to you guys he's not the answer?
And I don't think Justin Fields necessarily declined. I think he actually took a while to get going. If you remember his first few starts, they barely let him throw the ball. And so he was putting up like literally nothing as a passer. And then eventually, I actually thought he improved over his tenure in Chicago, but it's nothing like getting the number one overall pick in Caleb Williams. I do think it strikes me as odd that Pittsburgh has essentially, according to them anyway, decided that Russell Wilson's going to be their guy and Fields has no chance to win this job, because I'm not so sure Justin Fields isn't or can't be better than Russell Wilson this year as early as week 1. So if he's not better already. So I think, but the thing about Fields is I just think processing, I think he takes too long. I think if you want to look at metrics, I think it's, time to throw. That's where he really struggles. He's just not processing as fast. And you compare that to a guy like CJ Stroud, who it took him 2 weeks to get up to speed. I think he got sacked like 9 times, like Simon talked about. After that, bad O-line didn't matter because he can anticipate throws. That's why CJ Stroud is going to be good. And we're not worried about regression. Anticipation, that's what Justin Fields doesn't have, probably will never have. But in fantasy, still plenty of rushing upside to land himself in the top 10 or even top 5 most weeks.
Gunnar, what about you?
Yeah, no, I agree with Raybon. It's his processing. He probably leaned on his rushing upside, probably too much, but that was great for fantasy. But also the Bears didn't really set him up for success like they are with Caleb Williams right now. I mean, when he was rookie, he's throwing to Darnell Mooney and the already washed, Allen Robinson, Marquise Goodwin. Whereas, Caleb Williams has DJ Moore, Keenan Allen, and Rome Odunze. So, I mean, they're just setting up Caleb Williams for success a lot early on. So I can't fault Fields for all of that. But, Fields is great for fantasy. I have no issue with Justin Fields when it comes to fantasy.
Simon, did you want to transition to 4, or would you like me to do it to his next pick?
Yeah, I was gonna say you can run it out just because I know we're crunching on time.
All right, Kroner, give us your 4th.
Yeah, so it's Marquise Brown to the Chiefs. Piggybacking what Raybon said about Xavier Worthy, this is just a great spot. Anytime you have somebody going to play with Patrick Mahomes, that's a huge upgrade. But also, as Raybon mentioned, Rashee Rice is in some pretty significant legal trouble. Who knows if or how many games he will get suspended? But I could see them maybe leaning on Brown early on. I like Xavier Worthy a lot. He has a ton of speed, but his, route running, his route tree might be a little bit more simple to start. So I think Brown might be his top receiver to start. So, which is when Rashee Rice will potentially be missing games. So I thought Marquise Brown was a great landing spot for him and for the Chiefs. It does give them insurance in case Rice does get suspended. So, similar to what Raybon was saying, I think, Brown and Worthy to the Chiefs was 2 really intriguing moves this offseason.
You skipped one.
Oh, I did?
Jonathan Brooks to Carolina.
Oh, okay. Well, I'll talk about that. Yeah, Jonathan Brooks being drafted by the Panthers. He was arguably the top running back in this class, but he suffered an ACL tear in November. So, he might not be 100% for week 1, but, this was a good landing spot. I thought the Cowboys would have been the best landing spot, but this is probably the second one because he's going to have to compete with Chuba Hubbard and Miles Sanders. So I think once he is fully healthy, he's going to be the lead back here. And again, when I was watching his tape at Texas, I just kept thinking Todd Gurley. He reminds me of Todd Gurley. That's how good I think he could be. So this is an offense that could be better this year. I mean, we picked on the Panthers all last year, but this year, under Dave Canales, it could be a lot better. And Jonathan Brooks could benefit from that. And he could help, open things up for Bryce Young as well. But, Brooks is one of my favorite running back prospect in this class, and he landed in a pretty solid spot to be a workhorse back.
You were in such midseason form, Kroner, that you transitioned perfectly into Raybon's 5th and final most intriguing move of the offseason.
Yeah, I like Sean alluded to it with Dave Canales coming over from Tampa Bay as the offensive coordinator. Now he's the head coach in Carolina, obviously going to have his fingerprints all over this offense. And I think that's really important for a couple of reasons. The first is Canales is building up a track record of being a quarterback whisperer. So he's been working with Geno Smith in Seattle, pretty much Smith's entire tenure there. And he's the one that really receives credit for that massive turnaround that Geno had a couple of years ago. And then last year, when he got the job in Tampa Bay off the strength of that Geno turnaround, Geno's numbers dropped across the board pretty much. It was subtle, but they did drop. And that's even with, better receiving core because you had Jackson Smith and Jigba, a first round pick. And then he goes to Tampa Bay as the offensive coordinator, and Baker Mayfield has a career year after he's bouncing around. I mean, I went to a game out here and, he was like playing the Raiders with the Rams on like 2 days. He had just flown in like the day before or something like that. He was wearing the playbook on a flight, and now he's having a career year, leading the Bucs to a playoff win, not just a playoffs, but a playoff win over the defending NFC champion. So I think that this guy, if anyone's going to turn around Bryce Young, and I was way down on the Panthers last year. I mean, they were the team that I just could not understand their win total at all. I couldn't understand why anyone was investing anything in. I just thought they set Bryce Young up to fail last year. Bad offensive line, no speed, just a terrible situation. Frank Reich, one of the worst coaches. Now you got Canales working with Young. You got Deontay Johnson, who's one of the best route runners in the league, coming over from Pittsburgh. Underrated move. I like Johnson. I think he could outkick his ADP. He's usually going around wide receiver 35 to 40, I think he could finish in the top 15, top 20, because we saw that with Adam Thielen last year. Even on this, terrible offense, Adam Thielen still managed to be a very valuable, the ghost of Adam Thielen, I should say, managed to be a very valuable fantasy receiver last year. Deontay Johnson he's in his prime. I know it didn't show in Pittsburgh, but so I think that's a real positive development. Sean already mentioned Brooks. You revamped the offensive line. You went out and spent, $150 million on interior linemen. Robert Hunt comes over from Miami, and then you got Damian Lewis coming over from Seattle. And that's really important for Bryce Young because he's short. So interior pressure, big problem, because their tackles are fine, Aquanu and Moton, but their interior line was one of the worst we've seen this decade last year. So pretty much everything about the Panthers offense is night and day. You also drafted a rookie, Xavier Leggett, who I think is already better than Jonathan Mingo. So they now have a formidable receiving core. They have some juice in the backfield. They'll have Young protected, and they have a guy that's proven to take guys that we had no hope for and turn these guys into above average starters. And you're looking at Bryce Young, who's the number 1 overall pick, so the talent is there. I think you could see a big turnaround, and that, Simon, is why the Giants aren't my favorite ugly, disgusting best ball late round stack, because you can get Bryce Young outside the top 20 quarterbacks. Deontay Johnson is their highest drafted receiver. His ADP is like wide receiver 35, wide receiver 40. All their other receivers are lower than that. Their tight ends probably aren't going to be of much consequence. I like Sanders, the rookie, but rookie tight ends, especially in the middle rounds, probably not going to do much. So I think you could stack Young and his receiver, and Johnson, Thielen, and Leggett, and all those guys are easy to draft. You're not really competing with people. Once you get 1 or 2 of them, people probably aren't going to be rushing to draft the other guys. They're going to leave them for you because no one's stacking the Carolina Panthers. So I think it's a low risk, high reward bet that you can make in best ball. And then in redraft, I think I think Johnson will be very consistent, kind of like Thielen was over the first half of last season before he ran out of gas.
So 3 things. 1, Adam Thielen might have won us a couple of bets last year in that streak where we were betting the Panthers every single week. 2, you've just convinced me we're going to bet the Panthers every single week again. I believe they're 5-point underdogs against the Saints in week 1. 3, everything about the Panthers is night and day, except Bryce Young is still under 6 feet tall. Simon, your question.
Yeah, so we all have a guy, right? I got a guy who does a lot of research for me for fantasy, and when he gave me his sheet a month ago, I was shocked to see how different his view of the running back position and just the overall fantasy is this year. So I'd love you guys your opinion on it. His 1 through 50 rankings, his number 1 is McCaffrey. Everyone's got that. His number 2 is Robinson, the running back for Atlanta, and his number 3 was Barkley. And people right now are getting Barkley in the middle of the second round to the end of the second round. His whole view is Barkley was going top 5, top 8 his whole career on the Giants. Now he's on the Eagles, the best offensive line he's ever had on one of the best offenses he's ever been a part of. And now he's a middle to late round, second round pick. What's the view of Barkley? Why is he going outside of the first round? Like, why are people not buying in on Barkley on arguably the best offense he'll ever be on in his career?
Turner, you first.
Maybe just his touchdown upside is limited because anytime they get near the goal line, that's going to be a tush-push play. And maybe his receiving upside is limited because Jalen Hurts tends to scramble. He doesn't check down his running backs. But I agree, it is a better situation in terms of efficiency. I mean, he's going to have a really good offensive line compared to what he's used to seeing. I have number 4. I think you could argue, like Breece Hall. I love Breece Hall. He's my number 2 back. I think Jonathan Taylor is back in the mix to be a top 3 back. So I think just that tier, I don't think you could go wrong with anybody. But I think when it comes to Barkley, just his upside is limited just in terms of touchdowns and receptions. But he is a guy that hasn't really banked on a ton of touchdowns anyway. I think he's going to see the volume you want and need in a top 5 back. So I think he has a very high floor. But again, I think his ceiling could be a little bit limited.
Raybon?
Yeah, I'm higher than consensus on Barkley as well. But I don't think you need to spend, and that's a lesson that we, Sean and I talk about this every year. when we do our kind of, Fantasy 101 Fantasy Flex pod. But just because a guy is ranked in a certain spot doesn't mean you need to draft him there. And I know that might sound confusing to some people, but okay, if Saquon Barkley is going, mid-late second round and you have him ranked top 5, if you're drafting in the early second round or even, early to mid second round, like you don't have to use your first round pick on him just because he's ranked number 5. You're essentially getting 2 first round picks if you wait. So I am higher, but I do agree with what Sean said. I think it's really important to note that scrambling quarterbacks in general are not going to check down to running backs as much. Now, Barkley, they could still design screens and things for him. But Philadelphia had a real issue picking up the blitz last year. So I would think that Barkley may also have to stay in a block some. But at the same time, Philadelphia, in one of the Roseman, one of the best GMs in in football, he invested heavily in a running back, which, a lot of the analytics people kind of look down on. And this is not just investing heavy in a running back. This is a guy who is entering his age 27 season and entering his 7th year in the league. And he has had his share of injuries. He does have, over 1,500 career touches when you include the postseason. So there is some wear, but I think Philadelphia, they wouldn't have invested this much if they weren't intending to kind of use him and run him into the ground. Now, the offensive line also not as good as it's been. You got the Kelsey retirement and things like that, but still night and day better than the Giants. So yeah, I think Barkley is being a little bit undervalued, but I kind of agree with what Sean said. I think the floor is just very high because how they're going to use him. He's going to get a ton of snaps. He's never averaged, like for his career, he's around 19, 20 touches per game. So he's going to get a ton of work. He'll be fine. I don't think you need to spend a top 5 pick on him, though. I just take him if I'm early second. I'd take him there.
And some whispers, just for the fantasy heads out there, some whispers that he's been taking snaps in the tush push position. So be on the lookout. Like Barkley might be taking the tush push.
That would change everything.
I've done enough shows with Simon to know when he says there have been whispers, what he's really saying is, I got someone who's basically snapping the ball to Jalen Hurts. and I'm on the practice field right now.
Just be careful because Sirianni says a lot of crazy shit, Chad. So I don't want to go too crazy.
Yeah.
But he apparently was the one that's been saying it.
It makes sense because Jalen Hurts, you want his long-term health. You want him to be healthy long-term. So Barkley's you're already going to use him to the wheels fall off anyway. He's already 27. You might as well just use him on some tush pushes.
God, I cannot believe that Saquon Barkley is already in his 7th year.
Yeah, when you said that, literally my stomach dropped. I was like, holy
it's
shit.
I feel like he just started playing yesterday.
Yeah.
I like that we started the show with a lot of Giants love and Raybon in back-to-back segments just lays it on thick that he likes the Panthers more as his ugly team than the Giants. And then talked about how bad the Giants are compared to the Eagles. Nick Sirianni, when Giants fans are going after him and trash talking him, he ends it by saying, "We've got your best player." I think that's going to be a really fun rivalry this year. And if there is going to be a Saquon tush push, boy, that's going to be the game to do it. As a reminder, the Favorites podcast is presented by Bet365. Bet365 doesn't do ordinary. That's why you get more boosts with them than with anyone else. Every day they put out the odds on hundreds of bets to give you a chance to win more. Bet365 boosts specific markets, your winnings, and even parlays. And they don't stop there. Keep an eye out for their biggest and best odds with the incredible Super Boost. Check out the boost and see why it's never ordinary at Bet365. Must be 21 or older and present in Arizona, Colorado, Indiana, Iowa, Louisiana, North Carolina, New Jersey, Ohio, Virginia, or 18 and older in Kentucky. Gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER or 1-800-BETS-OFF in Iowa. Terms, conditions, restrictions apply. Want to thank Sean Kerner. Want to thank Chris Raybon. Follow them in the Action Network app. Listen to them on Fantasy Flex. Listen to Raybon on Action Network pods and during the season, the Sunday Six Pack with Stucky. Simon and I will be back with our next episode of The Favorites coming soon. Until then, download us from Spotify, Apple Pods, wherever you get your pods. Rate, review, subscribe, leave us 5 stars, say whatever you want. Feedback is a gift. Until next time, love you.